Breaking news. King Charles just shattered 70 years of royal silence with 5 words about Labour's policies that have triggered the biggest constitutional crisis since Edward VIII. Palace insiders are in complete panic. Westminster is in meltdown, and what Keir Starmer said in response could end his career before midnight tonight. If you want to see how this explodes, hit that subscribe button right now, because what I'm about to reveal will shock you to your core. Here's what sparked the chaos. At 3:47 p.m. yesterday, King Charles attended what was supposed to be a routine charity event at St James's Palace. His speech was meant to focus on environmental conservation and community service. Standard royal fare. Nobody expected controversy, but then, without warning, Charles deviated from his prepared remarks. His words were measured, but devastating. One must question policies that prioritise ideology over the well-being of ordinary British families. 5 seconds of silence followed, then gasps. Photographers captured the exact moment palace aides realised what had just happened. Their faces told the story. The king hadn't just broken protocol. He detonated a bomb under Downing Street. Within minutes, the footage went viral. Twitter exploded. TikTok erupted. Every news outlet in Britain scrambled to decode what Charles meant, because everyone understood exactly which policies he was targeting. Labour's recent announcements on inheritance tax, energy levies, and pension reforms. Policies that have devastated middle-class families across Britain. Policies that Starmer defended just 48 hours earlier as necessary for national recovery. And now the king, the one figure who must remain above politics, had publicly questioned them. Senior constitutional expert Professor David Williams called it unprecedented in modern history. Not since George V have we seen a monarch so directly challenge government policy, he told the BBC. The response was swift and brutal. Within 2 hours, Downing Street issued a statement, but it wasn't the usual diplomatic language. Labour sources described Starmer as absolutely furious when he saw the king's comments. He immediately convened an emergency meeting with senior ministers. The atmosphere inside Number 10 was toxic. Witnesses say Starmer paced the room like a caged animal. His exact words, leaked by 3 separate sources, were chilling. He's crossed a line. The Crown doesn't make policy. Parliament does. And if Charles wants to lecture me about British families, I'll remind him which one of us was actually elected. The gauntlet was thrown. Britain held its breath. But wait, because here's what the media isn't telling you. This wasn't the first time Charles expressed concerns about Labour's direction. According to palace insiders who spoke on condition of anonymity, the king had privately raised issues with government ministers on 3 separate occasions over the past 6 weeks. He'd been ignored every single time. One source revealed that Charles sent a confidential letter to the Prime Minister in early September. The letter, written in the king's own hand, expressed deep concern about the impact of proposed policies on elderly citizens. Starmer's office never formally responded. They dismissed it as royal meddling. That rejection, sources say, is what pushed Charles to speak publicly. His Majesty felt he had exhausted private channels, the insider explained. When the government refuses to listen behind closed doors, sometimes the only option is to speak where the people can hear. This wasn't impulsive. This was calculated, and it was a direct response to being stonewalled by a government that forgot who it serves. Meanwhile, pensioners who served Britain for decades are struggling to heat their homes this winter. Jean Davies, a 72-year-old retired nurse from Cardiff, was forced to choose between heating and eating last week. She worked for the NHS for 45 years, saved lives, paid her taxes, followed every rule. Now she sits in her living room wearing 3 jumpers because Labour's energy policies have made heating unaffordable. I voted Labour my entire life, she told ITV News, tears streaming down her face. I believed they cared about people like me. But they care more about their ideological projects than they do about British pensioners freezing in their own homes. Her story isn't unique. Across Britain, working-class families who built this nation are being crushed by policies that seem designed to punish success and reward failure. In Newcastle, 67-year-old former steelworker Thomas Bradley sold his late wife's wedding ring to pay his heating bill. In Glasgow, Margaret Wilson stopped taking prescribed medication because she couldn't afford both medicine and food. These are the people King Charles is speaking for. While Labour MPs enjoy subsidised meals in Westminster, pensioners skip meals entirely. We're talking about government ministers with expense accounts that would feed a family for months. Energy Secretary Ed Miliband recently claimed £3,400 for office expenses, while pensioners ration electricity. The contrast is so stark, so morally obscene, that even traditional Labour supporters are questioning their loyalty. One thing became crystal clear yesterday. The King sees what's happening, and he's decided enough is enough. Then something unprecedented happened that nobody saw coming. King Charles didn't stop with his public comments. At 6:15 p.m. last night, he requested an emergency audience with the Prime Minister. Royal protocol demands that such requests are granted immediately. Starmer had no choice but to attend. The meeting lasted 47 minutes. No photographers, no press release, complete silence. But palace insiders reveal what transpired behind those closed doors shocked even the most seasoned royal observers. According to 3 separate sources within the palace staff, Charles didn't hold back. He presented Starmer with detailed statistics on poverty, fuel poverty, and pension inadequacy. He quoted letters from ordinary Britons, real letters from real people suffering under Labour's policies. He challenged the Prime Minister directly on whether Labour's policies served the people or served Labour's ideology. His Majesty was passionate but controlled. One aide revealed he reminded the Prime Minister that the Crown has survived for 1,000 years by staying connected to the people, and right now the people are suffering. Starmer reportedly tried to defend his policies using economic projections and long-term models. But Charles wasn't interested in theory. He was focused on the human cost happening right now. One particularly tense exchange allegedly involved the King asking Starmer directly, "Have you spoken to any of these people yourself?" Starmer had no answer. The optics are catastrophic for Starr. A constitutional monarch bound by tradition to remain neutral felt compelled to intervene. That tells you everything about how desperate the situation has become. Senior Labour MP John MacDonald later admitted, "When the King feels he must speak out, perhaps we should listen." And here's where it gets really interesting. Sources inside the meeting claimed that Charles didn't just criticise. He offered solutions, practical, actionable solutions that could ease the burden on struggling families immediately. Temporary suspension of certain energy levies, emergency heating subsidies for pensioners, means-tested support that could be implemented within weeks. Starmer rejected every single suggestion. Why? Because accepting royal advice would look like admitting his policies were wrong. It would be political suicide. But refusing the King's counsel might prove even worse. Labour insiders described Starmer as trapped between 2 impossible choices: accept help and look weak, refuse it and look heartless. He chose heartless, but the domino effect was only beginning. Within hours, the pound sterling dropped 2 points against the dollar. Investors, spooked by constitutional uncertainty, began pulling money from British markets. Financial analysts called it a crisis of confidence, not in the monarchy, in the government. Labour's approval ratings, already declining, went into freefall. A Snap YouGov poll showed 68% of Britons agreed with the King's concerns about Labour's policies. Only 19% backed Starmer's response. Even more devastating, 43% of 2024 Labour voters said they now questioned their support for the party. In critical demographic groups, the numbers were even worse. Among voters aged 55 and over, 81% sided with the King. Among traditional working-class voters, 74% said Starmer was wrong. These are Labour's core constituencies, and they're abandoning ship. The numbers were brutal. In key marginal constituencies, Labour's lead evaporated overnight. In Swindon, from +7 to -2. In Stevenage, from +5 to -4. In Wolverhampton, a complete collapse from +9 to even. This wasn't just bad polling. This was electoral annihilation in real time. Social media told the same story. Number sign Defend the King trended globally for 11 consecutive hours. Millions shared the King's original comments. Millions more attacked Starr's response as arrogant and out of touch. Celebrity endorsements poured in supporting Charles. Dame Judi Dench posted a simple message: "His Majesty speaks truth." It received 2.7 million likes. Former footballer Gary L. Kerr, usually left-leaning, tweeted support for the King's concerns. Even musicians and artists, who typically avoid politics, weighed in. The cultural tide had turned completely against Labour, and then came the international reaction. In Australia, former Prime Minister Tony Abbott praised Charles for speaking truth to power. In Canada, Conservative MPs called Starmer's handling of the situation embarrassing. In New Zealand, Opposition leaders questioned whether Britain still understood constitutional monarchy. Even American political commentators questioned whether Britain's Labour government understood its own constitutional framework. Fox News ran a segment titled Britain's King versus Socialist PM. CNN analysts debated whether Starmer had committed career suicide. Protests erupted across British cities by evening. In Manchester, 3,000 people gathered outside the town hall demanding Labour reverse course. In Birmingham, pensioners marched with signs reading, "The King speaks for us." In London, crowds surrounded Westminster, chanting, "Listen to Charles, not to Star." In Leeds, veterans organised a solidarity rally. In Bristol, students joined pensioners in unprecedented unity. Inside Number 10, the atmosphere transformed from anger to panic. Ministers are turning on each other with ferocity rarely seen in British politics. Deputy Prime Minister Angela Rayner allegedly confronted Starmer directly, warning him that his response to the King was a political disaster. Health Secretary Westing was overheard saying the whole situation was completely mishandled from the start. Chancellor Rachel Reeves held an emergency call with senior economists who warned her that market confidence was collapsing. Shadow Chief Whip Alan Campbell reportedly told colleagues that backbenchers were in open revolt. WhatsApp groups with names like Save the Party and Operation Recovery are buzzing with frantic messages. Some MPs are openly discussing whether Starr can survive. The question isn't if there will be a leadership challenge, it's when. One cabinet minister speaking on condition of anonymity told The Times, "We're watching a slow-motion car crash." The Prime Minister picked a fight with the most popular figure in Britain. What did he think would happen? Another said, Starmer looked exhausted and defensive during emergency cabinet meetings. He's lost his grip. The source claimed he thought he could steamroll opposition. He forgot that Britain still loves its king. Even more damaging, junior ministers are privately reaching out to opposition MPs, testing the waters, preparing contingencies. Some are already positioning themselves for the post-Armour era. The palace, meanwhile, has said nothing further, but that silence is strategic. Every hour, Charles remains dignified and composed. Starmer looks more erratic and more desperate. Constitutional experts call it brilliant crisis management. The Crown doesn't need to attack, Professor Williams explained. Silence is the most powerful weapon when your opponent is self-destructing. But here's the layer that could destroy Labour completely. Leaked documents from inside the Treasury show something Starmer doesn't want the public to know. Internal projections suggest Labour's policies will hit middle-income families far harder than publicly admitted. If these documents are real, and if they show what 3 separate whistleblowers claim, then Labour knew its policies would devastate ordinary Britons and push them through anyway. Think about what that means. Labour campaigned on protecting working families. They promised fairness and compassion, but internal documents allegedly show they calculated the political risk and decided to proceed regardless. One leaked memo reportedly states, short-term pain for long-term restructuring. Short-term pain. That's how they describe pensioners freezing and families struggling. Another document allegedly contains projections showing that 1.8 million households would face severe financial hardship. Labour proceeded anyway. The optics of that would be absolutely devastating. If these leaks are confirmed, Starmer won't just face political backlash. He'll face accusations of deliberate deception on a massive scale. Multiple sources confirm the documents are being verified by journalists right now. The Guardian, The Telegraph, and Sky News all have teams working to authenticate the leaks. The story could break within 48 hours. When it does, the fallout will be nuclear. Meanwhile, the Conservative opposition is seizing the moment with ruthless efficiency. Opposition leader Keir delivered a blistering attack in Parliament this morning. The King speaks for millions of Britons who feel abandoned by this government, she declared to thunderous applause. While Labour ignores the suffering of pensioners, His Majesty reminds us of our duty to the most vulnerable. Her words landed like hammer blows. The Conservative benches erupted in support. Even some Labour backbenchers remained silent, unable to defend their leader. Baden didn't just criticise, she introduced an emergency motion calling for immediate relief measures for pensioners. Measures remarkably similar to those the King allegedly proposed to Starmer. The political theatre was perfect. The polls tell the story. For the first time since the election, Conservatives have pulled ahead. Latest figures show Conservatives at 36%, Labour at 31%. Reform UK at 18%, a 5-point swing in less than 24 hours. In marginal seats, the collapse is even worse for Labour. Seats Labour won by narrow margins are now projected Conservative holds. Focus groups reveal voters using words like arrogant, out of touch, and elitist to describe Starmer's government. One focus group participant in Birmingham summed it up perfectly. The King cares more about us than our own Prime Minister does. Knock isn't just attacking Starmer, she's positioning herself as the defender of British values and constitutional tradition. And it's working brilliantly. Her approval ratings jumped 9 points overnight. Conservative membership applications surged. Donations flooded party coffers. After years of decline, the Conservative Party suddenly looks like the future. The next 72 hours are absolutely critical. Labour faces multiple potential disasters simultaneously. The Treasury leak investigation could expose deliberate policy deception. Backbench rebellions could force votes of no confidence. Market instability could trigger economic crisis. International embarrassment could damage Britain's global standing. And the King's intervention has fundamentally shifted public opinion against the government in ways that may be irreversible. Britain is watching a Prime Minister who picked the wrong fight at the wrong time with the wrong opponent in real time. This crisis will be studied for decades as a masterclass in political self-destruction. At its epicenter stands Keir Starmer, who looks increasingly isolated, increasingly desperate, and increasingly finished. Constitutional historians compare it to the abdication crisis of 1936. Political scientists reference the Suez Crisis of 1956. But this time, it's not the King who's under pressure. It's the government. Not since Anthony Eden's Suez disaster has a British Prime Minister faced such a rapid collapse of authority. And just like Eden, Starmer's enemies smell blood. They're circling, they're plotting, and they're ready to strike. The question is no longer whether Starmer survives. It's how long until the final blow lands. So here's the question that matters. Does Starmer survive this constitutional crisis? Or is his premiership finished? Did King Charles just save Britain from disastrous policies? Or did he overstep his constitutional role? And will Labour ever recover from declaring war on the monarchy? What do you think? Did the King do the right thing by speaking out? Was Starmer wrong to dismiss royal concerns? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one, and if this story shocked you as much as it shocked us, share it with everyone who needs to see what's really happening in Westminster right now. The mainstream media won't tell you the full truth, but we will. Subscribe and hit that bell, because tomorrow we'll reveal the leaked Treasury documents that could bring down the entire Labour government. This is far from over. The next 24 hours will change British politics forever.